I was a writer at 5. I don't think of Bret Easton Ellis. Art is not here to change society. I'm confused about what my place in the world is at this point. I'm having plumbing problems in my apartment right now. The French. I love the French. I love when they ask questions like this.
I'm going to talk in English.
Yes.
But it's not my mother tongue, so I will probably do some mistakes.
Can you say, how do you say, curse, bad words, or no?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, because
and we won't beep. We won't beep.
You won't beep. Okay.
You're in France.
Okay.
You can say fuck. Okay. You can say whatever you want.
I usually don't, but in case, you know.
Sure.
I'm wearing a filthy hoodie. I've been traveling for 2 weeks now. My clothes, I have some clean clothes, I have some clean underwear, I have some clean t-shirts, I have some clean socks, but my hoodies are all a mess. I only have 5 of them, and they're filthy.
All right.
I'm ready.
Okay then. So we're going to talk about the book, but first of all, I wanted to ask you a very maybe silly and very simple question, which is what is a book? Because The Shards, your latest book, actually you published it in a podcast at first.
I did.
So it was not a text, it was something you could hear.
It was, and it is still something that one can hear. One can go to my podcast site, the Bret Easton Ellis site on Patreon, and you can hear 33 hours of the unedited version of The Shards for only $6, €6. And so it still exists. I'm never taking it down. I recorded this between, I think it was September of 2020 to September of 2021. I began writing The Shards in April of 2020, during lockdown, during the COVID pandemic, during the season of the virus, I called it. And so I was writing this book that I'd been wanting to write for 40 years. It finally came to me. I finally felt it. I finally connected to it emotionally. After all these years, when I first thought of it at 18, I was 18 years old when I wanted to write The Shards, but I wrote less than 0 instead. And this book came to me, so I was writing it, and I was in love with this book, and it was so great to have a book to go to after 13 years of not publishing a novel. And I told my podcast producer, I said, there are no guests. No one's out. We're on lockdown. There are no new movies. What are we going to talk about? I'm sick of talking about COVID. Why don't we serialize a novel? Never been done before. We checked. No one had ever serialized a novel on a podcast. And so my producer said, I don't know. And then I said, let's just do the first chapter and see how it goes. And so we did the first chapter, and the response was tremendous. People loved it. They couldn't wait to hear for the second part. Now, I did not write this for a podcast. I write this as a novel. It is a novel. It was always meant to be a novel. It was really fun, though, to do it as a podcast. But then, of course, capitalism comes in, and your publisher demands the book, and there's agents who want their 10% and their 15%, and so deals were made, and so we are now in the middle of a European tour, and I am promoting The Shards.
But it's not the same experience to hear a book or to read a book. And
no, and I must say something. I do not like to listen to books. I am not an Audible guy. So, and neither is my podcast producer, neither is he. But we were shocked that there were a lot of people who are. And when I look at my royalties and when I look at what my sales are, I'm very surprised to see how much of them are from Audible books. It's not the same at all. I like reading a book. I like imagining while I'm looking at the words what this world is like and how I'm creating it in my head. And I also, there's something about pacing. I get frustrated with a reader sometimes. I don't think they're reading it correctly. And so I know, for example, I think my reading of the original Shards, the Shards that is unedited and is 33 hours long, is much better than the version I recorded for my American publisher, which felt very stiff and mannered, and they told me to really enunciate each word in a way that felt unnatural to me. So I don't know. If anyone wants to listen to it, they should listen to the original. But I agree with you. I prefer the book.
I really need to touch a book.
Completely.
But some people, they use a Kindle. They read on the screen.
Yeah.
Is it something to you that, is it still a book to read a book on a screen? Is it?
I do it. I do it sometimes when I travel. I do download a book every now and then. It's not but still, I have brought 6 novels with me on this tour. 6 books, nonfiction and novels. And so I read every morning. It's the only way that I can start my day, and I like to hold a book. I am a guy from the analog era. I have 1 foot in analog, I have 1 foot in digital. But I am an analog guy, and so I still like CDs, compact discs. I have a fetish for them. I like the glass cases. I like the disc. I like the photograph on the cover of it. I just am bored by going onto Spotify or just like downloading a song. I like the analog experience of holding this thing. And I was trained that way with books and with records and going to a theater to see the movie. It's just, this is just the product of being old.
Do you think maybe one day people will stop reading books on paper? Is it possible for you?
I think they already have. I meet millennials all the time who've never read a novel. It's not so shocking. I think there are so many other options that are available to people right now. And I do believe that you need to somewhat be trained in terms of reading a novel in ways that you don't necessarily have to be by just watching a movie or listening to a song or going on TikTok or something. It takes a certain amount of education to be able to read a novel and to understand metaphor and to understand irony and to understand that it is not a literal experience. Books are not mirrors. They're not supposed to be a mirror. They're supposed to be a window. They're supposed to be a window or a door you go through and experience another world. I have a feeling right now that a lot of people want to read novels that conform to their ideology, their identity, their experience, and they don't want to take that step into another person's shoes. And that's why I think a lot of novels aren't being read, and I think that's why a lot of bad novels are being written. People aren't studying books anymore. That means students aren't reading books anymore. That means the notion of Charles Dickens or Tolstoy or Flaubert or Mark Twain is disappearing, even if someone under 20 has even heard of these people.
There is a strong competition. The days still last 24 hours, and there are like social medias, there are series, there are movies.
Of course.
And do you think, as a writer, writers have to adapt or to change the way they write in order to be catchier, or should they not care about this and keep on writing the way they do?
I mean, I can't write that way. I am not a career writer. I don't write books because I have to. I write books because I want to. I feel something. I have to feel something. Pain. Usually pain. I have to feel pain. I'm confused about what my place in the world is at this point. I'm confused about unrequited love. I'm confused about my terrible father and the things he abused me with. Whatever the subject is that is haunting me at a certain time, I write a novel. That's how I do it. I don't record an album, I don't make a movie. I like to write a novel, and that's how I've always done it. So to me, you say all these things, and it's probably true. Maybe many writers do that. But I haven't written a novel in 12 years because I haven't felt a novel. I am not the kind of career writer that calls up my publisher and says, okay, I have a new book for you in 18 months. Give me the money. We'll get it. I'll do the promotion. And then we'll do a 2-book deal, and I'll give you a I don't do that. I don't even take advance from a publishing house. I haven't been in touch with a publishing house about a novel since 2009. And so I don't really work that way, and I don't really care. I work the way I do. It's a natural, emotional process for me. It is not an over-intellectual process. It's about feeling. And if I don't feel the novel doesn't get written. It's as simple as that. So I'm not worried about competing with The White Lotus or Everything Everywhere All at Once or whatever the popular Beyonce record or whatever it is that people are obsessing with at the moment. I'm not competing with anybody. I can't create that way. It's just not even part of my process. So my answer to that is no. Though I am sure there are plenty of people who believe, as I did once, that TV is pretty great and there are great miniseries. And I think a lot of people have stopped reading novels and look at the miniseries, the short form series, as a kind of replacement for the novel. I know certainly the older members of my family, from my aunt to my mother, feel this way to a degree. They read much less and watch much more TV.
Okay, so we talked about what was a book, but there is also the question, what is a writer? Is a writer someone who writes a book? Or is it something more? What is a writer, actually?
The French. I love the French. I love when they ask questions like this. It's so poetic. It's so beautiful. It's so unanswerable. I don't even know what to say to it. I don't even know how to approach it. I really don't know how to approach it. What is a writer? You're asking me, what is a writer? Well, a writer is someone who is expressing a feeling they have about the world. That's how I've seen it. And in my case, however, is how I have seen the world over a period of 40 years. My first published book was Less Than Zero. It was about a 19-year-old guy, and I was 19 when I wrote it. And I was, the confusion of adolescence, the movement into adulthood, drugs.
But were you a writer? Were you a writer when you was 19?
I was a writer at 5. I was a writer at 5. I don't know why. I think it's because my parents had so many books around. I lived in a house filled with books, and I was always picking up books, and I was reading books at a very, very young age. And I got to the point where I wanted to write my own. So I wrote children's books at first, and then I did comic books, and I did a couple of graphic novels. And then I wrote my first novel actually at 14. I wrote a second novel at 16. And then I wrote Less Than Zero at 19, and it was published when I was 21. I've always been a writer. Why? Because I love books. And books, for me, were the main way, the way I liked best to express myself. And it's also non-collaborative. When you make a movie, you have to work with so many other people. A book is such an intense, intimate experience to write. There is no one there to help you. There is no one there to dictate what you must do or where you must go. You are all on your own, and the freedom of it is intoxicating.
So the book is called The Shards.
Yes.
Actually, when you look at the cover, it's not The Shards. It's the new Bret Easton Ellis book. It's like your brand. Your name is actually bigger than the name title. Do you think you like a brand? Like people will go and say, oh, I want to buy the new Bret Easton Ellis book. How is it to be a brand somehow?
Oh, you mean when I wake up in my mink bed and I pour myself a glass of champagne in the morning to get up and snort a line of coke and put on my big regal robe and then think about how important and wonderful it is to be a rock star, to be Bret Easton Ellis. I gotta tell you, I'm having plumbing problems in my apartment right now, and I am obsessed with getting these pipes replaced. This is my obsession right now. I'm worried about my aging parents. My mother is elderly. I have a sister who has intense psychological problems and she needs to be institutionalized. She won't do it. I'm very worried about her. Very worried about my partner who got out of rehab last year after being there for 4 months. And we were both worried that I was going on this tour. What if he wanted to use again? And on. Real life problems really subsume me when I'm living my daily life. I don't think of Bret Easton Ellis. I know that this is a thing that is out there and that you are right. My name is on the top of the book in big letters. And so it really doesn't even matter what's in the book. People buy a Bret Easton Ellis book. Not a ton. I have a cult. I don't sell millions and millions of copies. You should see my royalty statements. I don't. And I'm not bragging or complaining about that. It's just a fact. But there is a cult out there that like my books, and that's wonderful. But I also have a real life that has painful things in it and everyday things that I've got to deal with. And, so I don't buy into the myth or think a lot about the Bret Easton Ellis thing. I'll leave that to other people to do it. I'll leave it to my publisher to do it. I'll leave it to my agency to do it. And you also have to understand that I publish infrequently. I don't publish a lot at all. I've published very few books during my 40-year career. I think 8. This might be the 9th one. That's not a lot. And so I'm doing other things, and I buy podcasts, and I want to get a movie made that I'm directing, and then real life problems enter in. But I look at myself as a person with a life and normal things, a normal routine. I happen to be a writer, but when we get into this whole notion of being on this tour, and there's a room full of people here who are filming me now, there's two over here, there's one over here, there's one over here, I am aware of what you're asking me, but I just don't think about it that much.
Okay, let's talk a bit about the shards. The narrator is called Bret Ellis.
Yes.
You are Bret Easton Ellis. I mean, is it somehow like a game for you? Is it important actually for you that the reader wonders what's true, what's not? Is it something like funny? Is it why do you do that basically?
Well, it's natural. It's just natural. It's not anything I think about. Much of the shards, as much as it is about horrifying things and a serial killer who does terrible things to people's bodies, and that there is a fair amount of blood and violence in this book, there is also a lot of it is about what I actually did go through at 17 in that year of 1981, and I wanted to write about that. And the character is writing his first published book, Less Than Zero. There are so many autobiographical elements in this book, including the fact that I did have a beautiful popular girlfriend, even though I was gay. I wanted to fit in with the popular set, which I did. I don't think I was particularly popular, but I was popular because of my proximity to the popular set. I wanted to write my feelings about a couple of closeted boys that I was having secret sex with. I wanted to write about many things that were happening in Los Angeles at that time. The movies, the music. I think there are many Spotify playlists of the shards, and they're like 10 hours long. I didn't know that there's like 150 songs that are mentioned throughout the soundtrack of the shards. And I don't ever feel like I'm playing a game, but when I'm reading any book, I kind of want to have a suspended belief in reality. And even when I'm reading Dickens, Charles Dickens, which I'm reading right now, I'm wondering, how does Dickens know this? How does he know what that street looks like? And how does he know that someone would gesture like that in a brewery when they would pick up a bottle? I mean, that's what a good author does. A good author actually makes you believe that you are actually you're reading something that actually happened, or that actually experienced. But I'm not playing any kind of game with a reader. I'm just being emotionally honest and writing about what I want to write about. And when I realized that I wanted to write so much about being 17 and my youth in LA in 1981, I thought, why would I call this character Sam or Alex or Jean-Louis or whatever? I mean, he was me. I was writing about myself.
But the action in the shards in the book takes place in 1981, and there obviously there were no mobile phone, there was no internet, there was no that. No. Nowadays we are right now in 2023. In reality, because we talk about what is real and what is not, it's much more complex. You mentioned AI, you mentioned avatars, deepfakes.
Yeah.
We don't know what's real, what's not.
Yeah.
How do you picture that now in our current society?
I ignore it. I just read novels. I watch cooking shows. I keep our TV onto the Food Network, it's called in the United States. And all they do all day is bake cakes, they make pastas, they have cooking competitions. I can watch someone make a pizza for 20 minutes and I'm completely happy. I watch movies. We watch movies and we watch TV series. We pay very little attention to the news or what's going on out there because so much of it has an angle, is slanted. 90% of Americans polled do not believe in the news or the media anymore. That is a terrible number, and that's on both sides of the aisle. That is scary. We are among those people, me and my partner, and we look at a newspaper and we laugh. I mean, it's like, it's so biased and it's trying to sell something, and it is all about money and who their subscribers are, and they give those subscribers the news that they want. And it's not real. So we have stopped doing that. I don't care about any of these things that you mentioned anymore. I am not of that generation.
Even artificial intelligence.
I don't care.
You mentioned it, like AI writes books.
Maybe they'll be better than most of the books that are being published now. Maybe they'll be better than Where the Crawdad Sings. I don't know. Maybe AI will write a great book one day or make a great movie. I suspect they will. I think there's going to be an Oscar category for best AI created film. You know, that could very, very easily happen. But I also know younger people who think that there are Instagram accounts that are going to be in museums in 100 years. Who knows? They could be completely right about that, and I can't make fun of that. That's just where we are. But I am of a certain age, and my concerns are I don't care about any of that.
You mentioned Less Than Zero, which is actually a character of the book, your first book, and the book that the Bret Ellis, the narrator of the shorts, wants to write.
Yes.
You've been published, it's your first novel, you've been published at 21.
Yes.
If I'm correct, right now you're 59?
59, yes.
And but your characters, they still have the same age, basically. Is it different to write about the youth when you're 21 than when you're 59? And what's the difference?
I must correct you. Every novel I've written has a narrator who is the age I was when I wrote it. So when I wrote Less Than Zero, yes, I was 19 or 20. And when I wrote Glamorama, I was in my mid-30s. I started in my late 20s, the same age as Victor Ward, but it took 8 years to write. So by the time I finished it, it was 35 or 36. Certainly the Bret in Lunar Park was my age. The screenwriter, Bret of Imperial Breadrooms, was in his 40s. And you must understand that this book is narrated by a 58-year-old man. It's not narrated by a 17-year-old boy. And the 17-year-old boy that I was, who tried to write The Shards, this novel at 18, there's no way he could have done it. There's just no way, and I knew it. I knew that I did not have, how do you say, the chops, the talent to write this book. But the minute I realized that someone my age, a 56-year-old man, 57-year-old man at that time, was going to look back on those events, then it opened up. It completely opened up to me, and I understood it better than I ever did, because there was no way this book could have existed without it being a memory piece, without the writer looking back at what it meant to be 17 or 18. All the attempts I made were kind of like, when I was 18, it was written like Less Than Zero. Like, I am walking down the street, I see Debbie in her BMW, I am hung over from the coke I took the night before, it had not been a fun party. Okay, that kind of writing. This is much more nostalgic and sentimental, and it's from a viewpoint of over 40 years. So it's a romanticized recreation of an era. And I think I like it much better because of that. But so I just want to make a slight correction about I might be writing about young people, but I am writing about young people from the vantage point of an older man.
And your characters, maybe just like you, they show no interest into politics. They show no interest into the environment or feminism. And right now, many young people show more interest into those kind of things with values and stuff. You obviously wrote about this in White, your previous book.
Yes, White was a controversial book, shockingly, because everything was controversial in 2019. Everyone was angry, everyone had an opinion, the world seemed to be losing its mind. And that's really what that book was about. It really wasn't taking sides, it was trying to figure out about why a lot of things had happened. Why were millennials so depressed? Why did Donald Trump get elected? All of these questions I had. You weren't supposed to ask those questions, I realized, in 2019, or else you were a traitor. And I was heavily, heavily criticized for even going there and even writing about this in the way that I did. When I saw the book simply as a reflection of the cultural rise and flattening out of Gen X. You also have to understand that the books that I've written are all about privileged people. I write about a privileged world because I come from a privileged world. So in this privileged world, politics often don't take any, there's no place for it because there's no need for it in any way. When you have everything, why would you be paying attention to politics? But that's also always been a critique in my work. My dad was a wealthy man who was extremely abusive. And I always connected those two things. And that's why I wrote Less Than Zero. That's why I wrote American Psycho. The books that I write are, in many ways, a big takedown on what the rich get away with. Like Patrick Bateman, and I'm not going to spoil the ending of The Shard, but like the ending of The Shards, a murder is committed and someone gets away with it because they're rich. That has always been something I've been fascinated with. And when I first thought of The Shards, that was the first thing I was thinking about. What if a rich person gets away with a murder and is a writer and creates a narrative? Anyway, all of those things. So, you know, politics, we were not growing up in 1981, and I can tell you this from either middle class, upper middle class, lower class. Politics were not in the conversation at all. We were teenagers that were obsessed with what was available. Sex, music, film. Film was great then. I mean, we're all movie mad. And that's what, entering into the adult world where there was even more sex and there was a way to make money. Those were our concerns. Our concerns weren't about our identity or ideology. We didn't define ourselves because we were gay or white or black or whatever. That wasn't what we were doing. We weren't interested in any of that. And so that was just that generation. I mean, I think that's just, I am Gen X. Sorry guys, apologies, Gen X. And I think one of the reasons why Gen X has been looked at as the most conservative of all generations by 11 to 15 points in many, many polls is because we were the freest. We had the most freedom, and we see it being stripped away now in terms of, you can't say this. This is wrong. There's a list of things you can say and you can't say. You can't write this. You can't make this kind of art. And we're just shocked by it. So I feel, and I wrote about this very much in White, and it's a terrible loss. It's a terrible time in many ways to be a young adult. I'd be terrified.
I know you work in Hollywood, you write scripts and stuff. And in Hollywood right now, basically, in blockbusters at least, diversity is very like, when you watch a movie, there is a black guy.
Meaningless, utterly meaningless. It's meaningless. I mean, and it's made fun of too by many people in Hollywood. It's forced diversity. It's not natural. It doesn't feel like it's a natural thing. It feels very forced. And it has been put into a kind of law that you have to do it. There is resistance to it in terms of the idea of, does the color of this person matter so much? Does it matter so much? Do we have to put it in? Is there a law that says we have to do this? Why not hire the best actor?
But maybe it's because you're white.
No, why not hire the best actor? Why does someone have to be cast because of their skin color? That's racism. That is a kind of racism. And that is liberal racism, and if you have to acknowledge it, you can, or you don't have to, or you can pretend it doesn't exist. But to cast someone or to hire someone simply because they aren't white, that is a problem. And there is going to be lawsuits throughout Hollywood because people have been told that they could not get jobs because they were white or they were men, and that is actually against the law. You can't do that. They're happening, but I would hope that talent would win out over whether you were a gay person or whether you were a black person. I mean, I think it's just shocking when certain groups say that an actor can't play someone because they aren't that thing. That's insanity to me, and that Hollywood adopts that. You can't play, you're an actor, but you can't play a trans character because you're not trans. And now this whole thing about gay actors, like you can't play a gay role because you're not gay or whatever it is. That kind of literal-minded thinking is not art. Those are a bunch of bylaws that you throw in there randomly or whatever. Believe me, there are plenty of people out there people of color and people of diversity who are extremely talented and get to make their movies and get to do stuff, but just don't do it just because someone is a woman or has a certain color of skin tone. To me, that just reeks of racism.
But don't you think it's a way to change society? Like if you put more women on screen.
We're not here to change society. Art is not here to change society. A Marvel movie is not here to change society. That is not why you should make a movie. If you want to do that, write an article and post it in the New York Times. Do not use a movie to change society. Those are the worst movies made, by the way. Those kind of movies, I don't want to go to a movie that's supposed to change society and make me understand more about feminism or whatever. I want to see a movie about a giant shark, and I want to see an entertaining film, but I don't want to go see a movie that is clearly about representation. Oh, wasn't that movie so good because it was so representative of so many different people? That's nonsense. Not interested.
You've been a trend. How is it to be a trend? Like you wake up and you see your name on Twitter.
It's all negative. It's all bad. It was never, when you're trending on Twitter, it is never a good thing. And I remember I was trending on Twitter because of this crazy interview I gave with a New Yorker, and it was posted that morning. And my boyfriend was reading it, and he's tugging at me, and he said, "You're trending." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're trending on Twitter. You've been number one, number two, number one." And I said, and he said, "You know, it's not a good thing to be trending on Twitter because I really don't know that much about social media. I'm not." And so, but the thing was that trending on social media because of this terrible interview I gave, we sold so many books. So Twitter is good in a way because without that interview and without that terrible review and everything, I think we were like in the lower charts of Amazon, and suddenly we were number one. So it's infamy, notoriety, I guess. I also have to admit that I don't handle any of my social media anymore. I don't handle my Twitter account. I don't handle my Facebook. I don't handle my my Instagram. I have young guys who do it, who work for the publishing house, and who also work for my Patreon site. So I'm off social media. Twitter used to be fun. Twitter used to be great and offensive and absurd and crazy things were said, and now it's just a horror show. I mean, who would want to go on it? I mean, I don't know. I think it's just, I've aged out. I've aged out.
Unfortunately, we run out of time, but I have two little short questions.
Yes.
The first one is, I heard you would direct a movie. Is it true or not?
Look, I've been supposed to direct a movie many times, and it's always fallen through. I think of Todd Field, who directed a great movie last year called Tar with Cate Blanchett. He was a very hot director in 2006 with a movie he made called Little Children. Very hot, very hot. 16 years of projects falling apart for Todd Field. 16 years with actors like Leonardo DiCaprio and Christian Bale attached to these big movies, and then the scheduling gets fucked up. The financing gets fucked up. Apple just canceled a Martin Scorsese, Leonardo DiCaprio film called The Devil in the White City, about a serial killer at the World's Fair in the early part of the 20th century. They said, you know what, we're not gonna do it, it's too much money. This happens 95% of the time. Projects don't move forward and get made. So I've been a victim of that. A victim, whatever. Yes, I am hoping to shoot a movie that I wrote finally after many false starts in October. It's a simple horror movie. The great scripts I wrote are now all dead. They're just dead projects. So, but horror movies can get made, and we do have the financing for it. And it has not been announced yet, so I can't name the actor. And we are going to hopefully shoot it over 4 weeks in October, probably in the Canary Islands. It takes place in Malibu, but Malibu is too expensive. But the Canary Islands look like Malibu. Who knew?
Okay, and one last question,
yes.
Because we have not talked enough about sex, which
yes.
is a big part of your
yes.
work. Can you tell me how to write a great sex scene?
You know, I get taken to task for having as much sex in my books as I do. I think if you're writing about young people, as I am in The Shards, you are going to write a lot about sex. If you are writing about a 17-year-old boy, you are going to be writing a lot about masturbation. A lot about masturbation, a lot of sexual ideas in his head. He's going to be thinking of sex all the time, much like I did at 17. I was noticing people. I was noticing their bodies. I even had a girlfriend, I was so horny, okay? So it was something that it needs to be portrayed authentically in this book. People think I go too far and I get too descriptive, but on the other hand, I don't win like the worst sex writing awards. People have admired many of my sex scenes because they are not decorated. They're not adorned with anything. I don't use metaphor. I just say exactly what's going on, and I don't use adjectives. I don't use descriptions. You know, there are so many bad sex scenes that are written where, you know, her love purse is spread open waiting for him to slip in the purple sword, whatever. And it's just, you know, it becomes a joke. I think sex scenes are very powerful and can be titillating and erotic when you simply say what it is you do and don't try to make it fancy.